So we're live in Facebook inside the Silver Tent, and I am so thrilled to welcome you, Paula Jones, to the Silver Tent and to Silver Tent TV, and a very exciting, I hope, inspiring, engaging conversation around magic and the culmination in horse magic. So how are you today, Paula?
Unmuting myself. Yeah, very good, thanks. Lovely to be here, lovely to connect with you here, Frangie. I'm really looking forward to it. Hopefully as inspiring as you think it's going to be. I'll do my best.
Well, I think the thing is that what you do and what you've been doing, certainly since I first met you in 2009, I think has become so embodied that I don't know, but I think it feels quite natural for you to create things that lots of other people might think is impossible. So for you, it might not seem particularly inspiring anymore, but it still looks and feels inspiring to me. So just to set the scene. So I met Paula in 2009 when I started an intuitive, well, something like 3 years of intuitive training with a facilitator called Darren Eden. And Paula was assisting and supporting him at that time. And so I've actually known Paula for like 14, 15 years, which is just gobsmacking. And I remember turning up, I'd done a one-day workshop, I think, with Darren, that was all. And I turned up at an 8-day retreat in the heart of Wales and met you for the first time. And I remember you saying that that you were moving back to the UK, that you had an ex-husband and 3 children back in Australia, and that you were really following your heart to come back to the UK. And if they didn't come with you, that was okay. And I remember thinking, she's either really, really selfish or really amazing. And I don't know which yet. But then you told me the outcome of that focus, that you were completely clear. You were coming back to the UK to live, come what may, that was going to happen. And so I really want to set the scene and ask you if you could share a little bit about what the outcome of that was, and holding that focus so completely clearly, like taking no prisoners kind of energy, really.
Yeah, no, it's nice to remember. It seems so long ago. Hey, I mean, I've lived in Australia for many years, and I got to the point where I had started to train in my intuition, train in with William Whitecloud in Australia, The Magician's Way. William had been my teacher for a while, and a lot of my sort of calling in a way was to come back to England. My folks were getting older, my marriage had broken down, and I'd known Darren Eden for some time by then, and Darren was coming to England and starting work. So I came over to kind of have a look and see whether coming back to England was the right thing. And I spoke to Darren, and Darren said, yeah, if you want to come back and come and work with me, that'd be great. And perhaps a little naive as a creator, I was just like, okay, cool, that's what I want, that's what I'll do, and very focused on what I was doing. But actually what happened was that after I met you, after I saw you, I went back to Australia, and obviously I wanted to be with my children, you know, and the last thing I ever wanted to do was to leave my children anywhere. But you know, when you follow your intuition, you're led by that. And so my intuition was just going, it's okay, just do it, just go back to the UK. And what actually happened was I did go back to the UK. All my children came with me. I think it took 6 weeks from the time I went back to Australia to go back to the UK, bring my children back with me. My ex-husband came back because he decided that, yes, it was true for me to go to the UK, but he didn't want to be without his children. So he came back to the UK. We were separate, but he came back to support the children settling in the UK. And on some level, I hear what you say about incredibly selfish. And it can feel sometimes when we follow our heart's desire that we're doing things that are selfish. But this is the way I've been living for many years. And I don't know, and teaching as well. And I don't know from myself or from anybody that I've ever taught, I've never experienced anybody that hasn't been led by their, their intuitive, their inner wisdom, their inner desire, their yearning for what's true for them, has ever had a bad effect on anybody else. It's always had, in fact, I'd say it's always had the opposite. With that particular story, what stands out for me is two things really. One is when because my children were young, sort of young, between 7 and 13, 14, so they didn't want to come to England. They had very happy little lives in Australia. But I remember my eldest daughter, and we'd been back in the UK some time, but she turned to me and she said, "Mum," she said, "God, so I hate some of the things you've done with us. I absolutely hate it. I hate the fact that you just, when you brought us over here." And she said, "But I've also learned that I can do anything. I can make anything happen. And the experiences that you've given me have opened that possibility for me." Yeah, so so that and it happens over and over. We think we're doing something, and that one of the reasons that we don't do it is often because we think of the effect we might have on other people. Yeah, but my experience is if we do what our true spirit wants us to do, and if we follow that path, then it will support others.
Wow.
Yeah, and on the other side of that, my ex-partner Johnny, he also came to the UK, and then spent lots of time over in France. We used to spend time at a retreat center, Buddhist retreat center with the children, called Plum Village, run by a beautiful, wonderful Vietnamese monk who's recently passed away, Thich Nhat Hanh. But we used to go there with the children on retreat. And so when Johnny came back with us, he went and spent quite a lot of time in Plum Village. Met a beautiful woman who he then had a beautiful long-term relationship with, became a beautiful friend and still is to the children. And in fact, subsequently, Johnny's been over to Plum Village and spent a year as a monk at Plum Village. So, like that, I didn't cause that, what I mean? But by going for what's true for myself, then, those are the sort of the impacts and consequences of that. It's not a selfish act.
That is such a brilliant way of recognizing when you took that huge leap of faith, that actually it worked out really well for everybody concerned. And you also had an incredible bit of financial magic with your house back in Australia, didn't you?
Oh, that's right. We did. So we did, because I had to sell the house because I was coming to England, and we didn't need the house in Australia anymore. So we sold the house, and we put it on the market. I had 6 weeks. So within that 6 weeks, we sold the house. We got more than we asked for the house. Like we got the asking price plus more, because 2 people wanted to buy the house. People that took the house were beautiful. They took our cats with them. They had a little son who fell in love with our cat and took the cat with them. So it was just, it's magical. And this is a long time ago now. And I look back and, sometimes I kind of forget that sort of happened. But it put me on a path of 2 things really. One is my own development, my own growth and commitment to myself, and choosing to live a life that is creative, because they're great creations. Yeah. And I love living in that creative orientation, but for me it's much more than that, because what I want for myself and for other people is to have an experience of life where we are fully expressed, where we're committed to that growth and development, and we're experiencing life, not just, oh, I can create that house, that car, that job. I mean, yeah, that's nice, but that's not what life's about. And I think, for me, the journey is one of that kind of wanting to the best that I can be, to live as consciously and as expressed. And if I can do that for myself and my family and for my clients, then makes me happy.
Oh, wow. I mean, I'm being re-inspired listening to all this, Paula, and in that sense of helping yourself be fully expressed, but also others, and how you've done that with each one of your 3 children. Because I remember doing some work with you when you first were in London, and it was quite magical, excuse me, how you got your first home in London. But then it went on with like the schooling for your three children, and what each one of them wanted, I didn't actually even know existed, but you helped each one manifest something that to me at that time seemed impossible, implausible. And I'd leave you thinking, she really thinks she can do that? Like, really? And so I don't want to steal your thunder, but would you mind sharing each one of those three? Because it's such a great path on our way to exploring horse magic.
Yes. Okay, so we'd come back from Australia, and my eldest daughter we went to time in Devon, to London, and then we went up to Northumberland, and my eldest daughter was had not completed her GCSEs because she'd had a different education system in Australia. So technically she was at the end of her first year of her GCSEs, going to her second year. And then we went up to Northumberland, and she'd had to go to a new school. And so we were really aware that she was quite a mature, young in the school age, but a mature young person, young woman at the time. And so we suggested strongly to the school that she went straight into doing her A-levels. Now Jade, my daughter, is not it's not like she's particularly academic, or she's smart, she's great and everything, but it wasn't for that. It was more because of her maturity and her expression of life, and going back, if she goes back a year, you're going to have trouble. She's not going to enjoy this. She's not going to be stretched in the way that is necessary, and for her peers will be younger than her. That's not what we want for her. And the teacher, I can remember the head teacher kind of like looking at me like I was a bit crazy. He says, well, I'll tell you what, I'll meet Jade. Daughter's name, please keep that confidential. So I'll meet your daughter. And he met her and eventually agreed to let her do her A-levels, but she had to take I think it was 5 GCSEs at the same time. But there she was studying, and she did fine. She did really, really well. In fact, I think she did her religious studies GCSE. She chose that one because it was the easiest one she thought could fit. She did her language or her science and her maths and English or whatever, and she had to pick another one. So she picked religious studies. Never went to a class. Picked the book up 6 weeks before the end of term, and took this thing. And I think she got an A for her. She got an A. Because I remember 2 years later, her sister did 2 years of religious studies at the same school and got like a B+ and went to every class. But that's by the by. But anyway, the head teacher at the end came to me and thanked me for suggesting that Jade did both her A-levels and her GCSEs at the same time. He said, I would never have normally said yes. He said, but what it showed me is just what a child can do, what a young person can do when we ask them to do that, and when they step up to do that. It's been an incredible journey to watch Jade absolutely blossom and absolutely be in the right place.
Wow. So there's that ripple out effect, not just for your daughters, but beyond that as well.
Yeah. So you never know. But then of course my middle daughter, I had 3 teenage daughters at one point. My middle daughter comes and is on the same trajectory educationally, but a very different child. And I'm not convinced that doing the same as her big sister's done is the right thing for her. Like, she could stay on at school, but she wasn't really being that inspired. So we're looking for an alternative school for her. And literally, this is a bit embarrassing, but I went online and found a school it's called Think Global School, and it's on the small print does say is the most expensive boarding school in the world. At which point I very nearly sort of went, oh, but there was a little line there, and something in me just went, pick up the phone. And Think Global School is a traveling boarding school. It's based in America, but they have no sort of physical school. They take 15 children every year, and they travel to 3 different countries with those children. And those children study an international baccalaureate and study culturally in each. It's like a little mini United Nations. I mean, my daughter went to school with people from from Bhutan, from China, from Canada, I mean, just from all over the world, Palestine. I mean, it's just a phenomenal experience. But so, and they take 15 children, and it's very, very expensive. And something in me, in that little calling in you says, just do it anyway, pick up the phone. So I picked up the phone to speak to this Lily in the States. By the end of that call, she says, get her to apply. She said, if your daughter gets in, she will have a subsidy to as much as like what your income. And I think we paid a ridiculously small amount of money for her to travel to all these different countries. I think, and had this absolutely amazing 2.5, 3 years experience of traveling for her education.
So just to make it absolutely clear, you had this idea, you knew that from your bank account, not a prayer, but something in you said connect with them. And it manifested. Anyway. And your daughter was there doing a different country per term, isn't it? I think. Having what an incredible education. And then and of course it doesn't end there.
Yeah, well then so my youngest daughter, of course, by then is looking at her sisters and going, well, hang on a moment. So she comes to me with a leaflet and she says, Mom, this is where I want to go. And it was so sweet. And it was a boarding school and I'd never, ever in my life, ever believed that I would send my children to boarding school. Let's just get this clear, you know what I mean? Like, it's like never, it would not be. My mum used to threaten me with boarding school when I was a child, you know what I mean? Any more of that cheek and you're off to boarding school. That was like, so, but anyway, but Rosie comes and she wants to go to a boarding school down in Bath where she can take her horse. She can have a horse and take it to school with her. Yeah. And it was like, okay. And I'm going, you're too young, it's too expensive, it's too crazy, you haven't got a horse. And actually then me and Rosie went to Australia, back to Australia for a year. I mean, we went on holiday to Australia for a while, and then we came back and she went to the boarding school, had a horse and took the horse to school with her. It was very, very cute.
And so it's like, but that was something again that you didn't have, and that you managed.
No, this was that was a really that was a very yes that was a good and by that time my business was growing. I was I created a really good solid business. My business was growing, but that expenditure on education was absolutely massive at the time, but we made it happen, and that was also a really good experience for her, because it put her in a very horse world, which she really loves, gave her a lot of independence, got a lot of resilience to be away from, like, to kind of go away from home, but also have that kind of all the equine experience as well was really awesome for her.
And how incredible that she did the research to find something that she would really love. I mean, I didn't know that there were boarding schools where you could take a horse.
I thought she was joking.
I bet you probably knew she was joking.
You be careful what horse magazines you give to your children when they're young,
Unless they can manifest and know that they have the ability to manifest like this, because I mean, I know enough to know that you don't think that, that you're a particularly special manifester. Although I do remember that wonderful, wonderful sentence, that wonderful question you posed to me really early on when you were quite stern, I think. You said, Francesca, are you a waiter or a creator? I was like, whoa, hang on a second. Damn, I think I am actually waiting. And I hadn't seen that, and it was like, oh. Yeah. And as you can tell, like, I think you asked me that something like sometime between 10 and 14 years ago, and it stayed with me.
Yeah,
waiting for this end result, or am I creating this end result? And this is what you take people through, isn't it? Is this leap from being a waiter to being a creator, I guess, although I don't think you use that terminology anymore. But yes, would you like to share a little bit about what you do, and then how that how that drew you into what you now call horse magic.
Mm, mm, mm. Yeah. Interesting in the waiting and creating. I'll just because I think what I would say to that now is the difference between kind of life happening to us and life happening through us. Yeah, and it's much more magical when we let life happen through us. So thanks for reminding me.
And tell you're a writer as well, can't you? That's just a really nice line.
Yes, yeah, that's been one of my journeys. So yeah, I think probably and we've talked to sort of quite specifically about areas of my story, but I think my story does start with that kind of that yearning that there's something more. You know, a lot of the people that I work with, that's really what they're going. They're going, look, it's not that life's terrible, but there's just more to it. Yeah, and that sense that we feel like life's kind of happening to us. And you know, I don't know if you recognize that, but that's how I kind of, I think my story started like that because I had a lot of traveling as a young person. You know, got married, had children, I was an academic in Sydney. I was a lecturer at Sydney University. And in some aspects, I kind of had it all. There was nothing, you know, I traveled a lot. We had a great life, 3 beautiful kids. I had a lot of security. In fact, I had what was at the time, it was a full-time continuing academic position, which meant I had a job for life. And even when I was at Sydney University, it was that sort of transition time where rather than giving full-time continuing jobs, they were putting people on contracts. Yeah, so like I had this security that was you know, but there was part of me going, but I don't know if I want this. And I had 2 things I think that I was really kind of yearning for. And I think one was for my own expression, like who am I and what do I want out of life? And one was for a more nature, more spirituality, more, you know, a more kind of grounded spiritual life, because I'd grown up and I'd done all the sort of Buddhist Zen practices and, you know, all that sort of stuff. And then all of a sudden I'm kind of like you know, got mortgages and jobs and cars and, you know, it's just like this. So something wasn't really working. And you know, I talk about life, the difference between life being mundane and life being magical. And something in me was like I'm going down the mundane path here and I don't want to. I didn't know this, of course. I mean, you know, and sometimes I think what made me actually, you know, what makes you make that difference? Because it was fearful looking out, you know, and going, well, I don't want this anymore. And it was fearful and very judged. Like, you know, my mum finally thought I'd made it because I was a lecturer at Sydney University, to suddenly go, well, actually, I'm going to go and do some sort of coaching thing. You know, it was like, it wasn't cool, you know, and it's so, but you know, there's a, so there was something in there, and it wasn't even what I was doing. I enjoyed because I was studying language, and I've since been a writer. I love language. But I think what I was really doing at that time was studying human behavior. Yeah, you know, it was through language, but it was actually human behavior that I was fascinated with. And so all this was sort of going on. And I think the turning point for me was going back, and we talked about Plum Village a moment ago, going back to Plum Village. And I have this memory and I have this picture of Thich Nhat Hanh, who to me is probably the person that I know. I've been in the presence of someone enlightened, you know what I mean? I mean, you know, absolutely, and loved his work. And we're on retreat in Plum Village with the children, and he's got my 2 eldest daughters, one in one hand and one in the other, and they're walking through a field of sunflowers. And you know what I mean? And I'm kind of like, those sort of things that happen, and you think, what am I doing in the middle of Sydney? You know what I mean? So anyway, triggering that kind of that move and that sort of starting to listen to what I wanted rather than kind of like where I potentially could have headed. So we moved up to northern New South Wales, and as we know, I don't know if anyone knows about the hero's journey, but you know, you get to a point on the hero's journey when you need a teacher, one shows up. And there was Mr. Whitecloud with his magician's way, you know, and that's when I met William at that point in my life that took me on a whole journey. And I didn't know any better, so I just threw myself in, you know what I mean? It was like I'd given up. And it wasn't all smooth sailing, don't get me wrong. There's a lot of challenges along the way. A lot of challenges. You know, life went pear-shaped, life up and down as life does. Um, and but you know, but they taught me that actually that I am resilient. You know, the amount of resilience and resources that we have within us was so, like, you know, so apparent, and seeing that by living it, you know, whereas part of me wanted just to stay on the edge. And actually, when I kind of lent into that yearning, you know, the magic happened every time. And just so I had this sort of you know, that I think that's part of, you know, brought me. That's when I came to England and I set up my own business in England, and I started to work. So on one level I was working you know, on myself, and on one level creating a coaching and facilitation business so that I could share with other people. um, and uh, and then that led to me being a writer. And so each time it's just like leaning into, we talk about leaning into, but you know, allowing my own inner wisdom to resource me and to guide me, rather than what I think I need to do or what I think the world needs to do. And I think once you're on that path, you see that path just keeps opening. You know, like it's often the initial. I know when I work with people, they often go, but I don't have the confidence, I'm too fearful to make that step. But I've made that step many times now, and I know that it doesn't mean that I'm any less fearful. But at that point, you know, that you sort of lean into it, then that's when the synchronicities happen. That's when people that you need show up. The teacher that you need is there for you, and that's my experience. So and so we talk about horse magic. And in a way, that's simply just another expression of my life and my growth and my journey. And I honestly believe that it's there because I want to grow and develop as a human being. And so horses have come into my life at a time when, like, it's like some sort of divine inspiration sort of going, well, this will give her. Yeah, because well, since even before I've known you, I've been on a human development journey as a worker on myself and as a teacher. But I got a horse, and the minute that I got my horse, that whole journey has just gone on another cycle. And I can honestly tell you, I have learned more about myself since I've had my horse Fergus than I have learned in all embarrassing, but all of my learning up to that date. Yeah. And obviously I'm at that point where that was the true thing for me. I'm not saying everyone's got to go and buy a horse. You know? I'm not saying that at all, but that's my experience, is that it has taught me so much. And so now I'm at the point, again, leaning into a new sort of a new area, leaning into a world where horses become part of, not all, but a part of what I do as a learner, what I do as a teacher. So that lent me to just before lockdown, I set up the first horse magic course, which was an exploration in a way into bringing horses and people into learning about the creative orientation, learning about intuition, inner wisdom, resourcing, and living that sort of spirit-led life.
I remember when you told me, when we met up after all that time, just a few months ago, and you mentioned your horse Fergus and horse magic. It's like, oh, I want to do this. And you know, for years, I've seen these adverts for people running leadership trainings with horses, that kind of thing, where they don't necessarily get on the horse at all, but they start, well, I don't know, I've never been to one of them yet, but it's always been there in the back of my mind. It's like, I'm really, really tempted by that. And I used to have a pony a million years ago, but I actually got very, very nervous of horses. And so there's a huge step for me to take in the fear of the horse itself, let alone the actual experience of the learning that would come from that. But when you said horse magic, like combining the things that I love, it's like, wow, I would really, really love to experience that. That feels so magical just in the description. So maybe you could share a little bit about how you came to actually have Fergus, because it's not like you've got a history of hunting and pony
No.
clubs and things like that as a child, is it? This is a new love, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. My two of my children have been very keen on horses, and so I've loved horses, and particularly my youngest daughter, the horsey schoolgirl. But and it was probably when my youngest daughter was a teenager, and she was getting quite seriously into horses, into riding. So I would be, taking her places and watching her have lessons, and I'd be like, I could give that a go. Just that little whisper, and so I started having riding lessons, and I had ridden as a kid, like a little bit, like not, I would never say it. My friend had a pony, we used to, I didn't know how to ride, but I started having lessons, and then we had this opportunity where myself and my youngest daughter went to Australia, and we were going back for a visit over, I think, the summer holidays, and we ended up staying there for, like, she ended up like taking some time off school, and we stayed in Australia. I think we were there for 10 months or something, and we had a great time. But we went back to where we used to live, outside of Byron Bay, up in the hills outside of Byron Bay. And my daughter started going back to her original school with her original teacher. I mean, it was very, very cute. But there was a woman there that was a friend of mine who ran a riding school. And I said to her, look, Rosie's back, she's really into horses. Will you teach her to ride? And she said, I don't teach children anymore. I said, well, you just meet Rosie, because Rosie's, you might like her, because Rosie's the... So anyway, we went round. By the end of that afternoon, she'd given Rosie a pony to have while she was in Australia. And so, so school was on one side of the road and pony was on the other. And I'd got invited to do some work at the school, some teaching at the school. And so we'd be going to school and we'd be looking like this, and I would go, well, I got to go there, and she'd go, so more often than not, I'd be dropping her off with a pony, and I'd pick her up on the way back. And so then I got riding. I rode a lot in that year, as much as I could. And there was, you get those little whispers that just anchor things, and just breathe some sort of whisper, some magic in your ear. Because the woman that was teaching Rosie and teaching me, and she said to me, she said, you should get yourself a horse one day. And honestly, I knew when she said that, I knew I would. I and then forgot all about it, you know what I mean? But that little whisper was in there, and it was just, she'd planted this wonderful seed. And so then when we came back to the UK, Rosie went off to boarding school, and I went to the local riding school and started to take some lessons and really started to enjoy it. And then I found a friend. It's actually a client of mine who I didn't know had anything to do with horses. And I'm talking to them once, and you don't know what I do you? And she was a riding instructor, and obviously, sort of in the same creative orientation that I was teaching and stuff. And so she became a really good friend of mine, and we created together Horse Magic, because I don't have the horse background. So she did the kind of the horse aspect of it, and I did the human development aspect of it. And so it was just this beautiful creation that we went twice. We went once and took my daughter Rosie with us, and then we actually put the event on. And I always, that just made that planted a seed in a way of creativity, of possibility. And after the first time that we went to Andalusia, it's beautiful. To Andalusia, you're out among the olive groves. I mean, it's magic anyway, just being there on horseback, But then we were introducing like what it means to live in that creative orientation, what it means to use your own natural gifts and talents to ride your horse, or to live your life, rather than kind of what you think you should do. And I had this experience where I think there was 8 people, and then myself and Louise, and these people weren't horse riders, I mean, they were varying degrees of ability with horses, and we had them doing the most amazing things that I don't know how they did it, what I mean? It was so magical, apart from that they're deadly focused, like absolutely focused. You know, you want your horse to go there and you want him to go at that speed. You know what I mean? That's the focus. And then being in a relaxed sort of state, in a state where you are just allowing yourself to show up in what needs to be shown up to get to where you need to be. And it's so impeccable, because that's what life is. Yeah, you know, people will come to me and go like, you know, I don't know what I want, or I haven't got clarity, or I want to, you know. And once you've got that clarity and you can have something to put your focus on, it's like then you can open up, can't you? And you can realize the resources that you have that you just don't know, you know. It's like, and so I saw something very special when we put that horse magic on, and that was, then we had lockdown, and that the first time, literally within weeks of coming back, I went, okay, I'm going to buy my own horse. And when I bought Fergus, you know, you're supposed to go and look at lots of horses, and they always say don't buy the first. And he wasn't the first horse that I saw, but I hadn't seen many. But I literally walked in, I had a ride with him, and I put him back in his box and in his stable. And I walked away and I'm going, I'll think about it, I'll think about it. And then the woman said, okay, well, you know, just go make a decision or whatever. And I suddenly went, I'm just going to go have a little word with him. And I walked into that stable, and that horse, my horse now, put his head over the bar and looked at me. And it was like seeing the picture that we'd used for horse magic, for the flyer, you know what I mean? Which was a magical horse. Yeah, we used this sort of magical picture. And I looked at my horse and I went, that's you, isn't it? I go, you're my horse, aren't you? That's this horse. And it was like, yeah, it was, yeah. And I just went, I've got to buy it. Well, I didn't have a stable. I didn't know where I was going to keep him. I'm going, yeah, I'll buy this horse. It's crazy. But it put me on a journey and seeing the potential. And you see, this is where the magic happens, because so many doors have opened up of, you know, I work with a wonderful guy now down in Dorset where I keep my horse. It's opened up new ways of being with horses that I just never imagined. You know, I've done horse massage courses. I've just come back from 2 weeks in the States where I've just studied with the most brilliant horse person I know. And the thing is, so that's obviously my own horse journey, but it's exactly what I teach about human behavior. You know, I'm in the States learning about being soft and centered and grounded with your horse so that you can communicate with your horse. And you know, isn't that what we're doing all the time when we're opening ourselves up to be soft, so that we can listen to our own inner wisdom? And when you're doing that with yourself, and then how you can communicate with your horse from there. So, you know, yeah. So I'm very excited now, because I don't know I know what horse magic looks like, but it's a very different iteration in a way of the first horse magic that planted such a rich seed.
Just love it. Love the journey that you are on that ongoing organic basis. And
so I don't want to interrupt, but what's also been beautiful is then I'll keep all these people like yourself that I haven't seen for a little while, and I talk horses and they go, oh, I just love horses. And I'm like, so many people, it's like I'm clueless to how many people, either because they've ridden as children or because they've just had that you know, that kind of respect, because horses, I mean, like they are magnificent. And I'm in the States, and literally out of my bedroom window every morning I've got a herd of horses, and just, you know, they open the gates in the morning, they just all go galloping off into the pasture, and I'm just like, oh, I'm in heaven.
so let me just clarify for those watching right now, is that horse magic, you don't need to be a rider, you don't need to want to have a horse afterwards, and you don't need to carry on having a relationship with a horse afterwards. This is purely a kind of conduit to that inner learning of living in that creative orientation that you talked about. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, no, it's not. Yeah, so I mean, the first time we went, quite a lot of people couldn't ride, and it's not even necessarily horse magic depends. I think there's a lot of iterations of it, and on one level, you can work with the horse on the ground. Like, you don't have to get onto a horse to learn an awful lot about yourself. because this, like, I've got leadership programs in the pipeline, which are literally for leaders that want to be better leaders, or people that want to, on a different program, just want to like express themselves, like learn about themselves at a deeper level. But I've also got things in the pipeline, which is something that's very new to me, but it's about, serving people that have had difficulties, that actually the connection with horses, because the more I'm seeing is actually how just being with horses and connecting to them has such an impact on our physical, spiritual health and well-being. And there's a lot of people, I think, that, I mean, you don't have to have been traumatized, but obviously that, but actually we're all kind of in that, we're all a bit traumatized, and we can all really help to come back to center and come back to ourselves through horses.
Wow. Just stunning, Paula. And when we were talking before we actually started the interview, you were saying how much you'd love to give like a tiny experience of going within into our hearts. And does this feel the right time to maybe invite us
good idea. I'd forgotten. So yeah, thank you. Yeah, I was suggesting to you, Frangie, that because sometimes you can hear people talking and it's like, oh, that's all right for you, but that isn't. How do you do that? Yeah, how do I live like that? How do I, what do I do? And there's something I do with with everybody that I work with that is so simple that I think it might be just, if people are up for it. If you're not, well, you can skip this bit. But just how simple it is to be able to access what we're talking about here. Because what are we talking? We're talking about accessing that inner part of ourselves, that inner resource, our intuition, our wisdom, whatever you want to call it. But it's that part of us that is actually connected to everything. How can I connect with my horse? I can connect with the horse because I can connect. We are connected, my philosophy of life, we are all one, we're all conscious and we're all one. And, from that perspective, then it's, why wouldn't we be able to connect with that inner resource? But here's the thing. So I'll give an experience and we can talk about it later. So if you're up for it, take a moment, and I'm just going to help you connect with yourself and connect with your intuition. And so to do that, we have to stop. Because if we don't stop, we're running on a rail track of normality. We're just running into our normal, doing our normal daily lives. So first thing we need to do is to take a pause. And that's very simple, because all we need to do is to choose to take a pause, take a breath. So in this moment, just invite anybody just to stop and take a breath. Now, I've closed my eyes at this point, but it's not a prerequisite. But if you're up for it, just gently close your eyes and take a few more breaths. Take the deepest breaths you've taken today. And as you exhale, imaginatively let go of everything. And as you inhale, imaginatively breathe in spirit, breathe in light. And breathe it really into your body, down into your belly. Exhale, let go of everything. I just imagine that I'm empty and that the breaths bring me to that soft, still space within me, where I know that I'm connected. Allow yourself to imaginatively fill up with spirit. And just when you're ready, just ask yourself, what am I yearning for? Simple question. What am I yearning for? What would I love? And whatever comes to you, just know that that is your intuitive self talking to you. Allow the truth to be heard, insights to be there. You can also ask yourself while you're here, what's obvious to you? So if if you're yearning, for example, my yearning's to have a horse, what's obvious to me? Just anything that comes to you. And just when you're ready, bring yourself back to the room, as it were. Open your eyes. You got a big smile there.
Well, I kind of knew. I knew what was likely to turn up, and I did have to let go of that so that I wasn't directing it.
Yeah,
but yeah, but it was really interesting, really interesting. You're going to have to ask me the questions now. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. So what did you get? What's
Well, I saw myself on the beach, which is just here, where I go often with my dog. But I reached out my right hand and took somebody's hand, and it was a man. I didn't see him. I just know that I was holding his hands, and I thought, oh yeah, that is kind of what I'm yearning for, is a relationship with a man. Then what was interesting was I reached out with my left hand and I took hold of somebody else's hand. So I felt that it was more than just a relationship with a man, but it felt very not online. It felt very, physically present, and this real joy at being outside and being connected physically with people in a natural environment. And even though I live here, my walks on the beach are for walking the dog. And then I come back and I get on with my work, and I don't spend much other time out there, and I don't spend much time communing with people in the flesh. And what's obvious is to do more of that.
Yeah, lovely.
And to really be open to creating those. I felt like the hand holding was this level of intimacy. It was more than, hi, how are you? How's the dog? Kind of passing conversations, but something that had a little bit more meat on the bone, I think.
Oh, lovely. No, yeah, thank you. That's yeah. I mean, and yes, and because it's so easy, isn't it? Especially when we've got like a dog. I've got a beautiful little puppy. I love taking her for a walk, but it's very easy to hide behind the puppy, the dog, or the child, or the whatever it is, isn't it? Rather than actually to get into that, to go beyond that, and to be a little bit kind of, because in a way they're great ways to connect with people, but we do then have to allow ourselves to go beyond that and be more intimate or more vulnerable, I suppose, to be more.
Yes. And like you say, the hiding behind is like, oh gosh, got to get back. Yeah, I'm going in that direction. Oh, you're going in that direction. Like, yeah, great. Okay, bye.
That was safe.
And I know that in me. And when I was here caring for my mum, that I hid behind her. It was like that, and there was a truth to that. I had to get back. I couldn't be out for that long. But actually I don't have that now. I don't. And when I shorten my experiences and my exchange with people, that's entirely my choice. I do that for no good reason. I don't tend to go out with a short time frame before I have to be on a Zoom. I don't do that. So actually, I do have plenty of time and plenty of lovely people I can commune with offline.
Yeah, beautiful. And that's, when I said at the beginning of like about, life happening to us, to life happening through you. And isn't that true when you have that space and you allow life to happen through you, so that when you do meet people, you allow it to go where it wants to go. Yeah, we're living in a world that, in my experience, wants to support us to get to where we want to be. And if we open up to it and sort of allow that, rather than, oh, I should be over here, or I need to do that, that's just our fear speaking. That's just wanting to stay in that life that we allow it to kind of be victim to. Or and I'm not and I'm not saying that life doesn't happen. Life does happen, and I'm a victim to life every day, just like everybody else is, but the ability to be able to step out of that and go, well, what if, yeah, I allowed my spirit to lead me rather than my sort of the belief of how I think it's going to be. Allow my spirit to lead me, and I go with that. Yeah, then that then opens up, and we start to express life. We start to experience it in a much deeper, much more meaningful, much more direct way, so that we're present to life. You know, that's what people want. That's what I want. I want to be free. I want to be present to life. I want to experience it. And I want to experience the joy of life for myself and other people. And the more I do that, the more life shows up. And, you know, the more, you know, that you know, because I don't want to just create material things, but material things show up anyway. You know what I mean? I don't have to go for that first and then go, oh, I need that to support this. I find that the more I open up and allow my spirit to lead, everything else then falls into place because it's there to support me.
It's so beautiful. And I don't think that I can hear that enough times, you know, that kind of not as a mantra, but as a reminder. It's like, yes, today it helps to be reminded of that. Tomorrow it'll help to be reminded of that.
Well, if you know, if this has served to remind people that, then I'm very happy, you know. And that little process that we did, you know, that's a sort of, it's just an open, but it's very powerful, and hopefully it worked for people. And if it didn't, I would suggest practicing it again, you know, and allowing yourself just to kind of give yourself that moment to stop and to pause and to open yourself up to hear what is in you. And, you know, the question that I asked was yearning, because I think that's kind of what's driven so much of my journey. But, you know, it could be just, what would I love, or what's true here, or what do I need to know here? You know, because once you're connected, the amount of resources and the amount of information, we spend so much time up here thinking that we know. My business is called Beyond Knowing, thinking that we know how it is. And actually, I've got a PhD in linguistics. I love, you know, I'm clever, you know what I mean? I love my intellect, but I don't want that to lead me, because when that leads me, I think I know, and all my resources are kind of resources that I already have. And when I open up and I go, well, you know, what if I connect and I open up and I listen to spirit knows everything. It's got my intellect there as well. You know, I don't have to not be rational and not be thinking. I love my thinking mind. I love my humanness. Yeah, but it's more than. And so from there, you know, the answers to life, you know what I mean? We don't know them. We're never going to know the answers, but the things that are actually pertinent to us, that are going to support us in our own expression, are there.
Wow. I remember, you know, I love the Beyond Knowing, and I remember I remember when I was doing all the trainings with you and Darren, or, you know, all those years ago, and there were a few people going nomadic. I'm sure you remember that. And I remember being in my little flat in Twickenham, you know, safely in my tiny little sitting room with my laptop. Not much different now, but there are elements that are hugely different. And thinking, please don't let me have to go nomadic. I don't want to go nomadic. I really don't want to go nomadic. And I would be tuning in. I remember tuning in with Liz, and she saw me like pretty nomadic, and how actually I love being able to create out of nothing, part of my heart. And I really recognized the truth of that. And of course I did go nomadic. And what I discovered is that how much magic happens when I'm in the unknown, you know, when I allow myself to go into that place of not knowing. But when I try and know, it's like I keep myself in a very narrow space. And that feels like an narrow energetically as well. So yeah, really get that sense that when I step out into that unknown, that's where I sense magic happens for me.
Absolutely. And then, yeah, because I mean, you know, not big on mantras, but if you want one, you know, spirit knows best. Yeah. You know, the knowing, what we know is nothing. We don't, in fact, I mean, this is, you know, introductory, hopefully inspiring talk, but, you know, when you really look at life and we think that we know how it is, we don't know how it is.
Yeah.
We don't know, we don't even know how this is here. We're having two different experiences. I can only have my experience through my lens of my, that's my experience. You're going to have yours. And a lot of other, we're all having our different experience. We don't know very much at all. And so when we're outside of that and we let spirit, but spirit's connected to everything, spirit does know. It wants to take us and help us and support us. So yeah, she knows best. And it's nice that you reminded, because I think for me this this time has reminded me of a lot of our journey together, which is lovely. And I really want to honor you for what you've created, because I wouldn't be here, the silver tent wouldn't be here, and I've seen you on that beautiful journey, like, and what have you done? You've learned to be resilient with it, to keep going and to follow, and because just life goes up and down, and I've had some down moments in my life, and we all have, and but it's okay, because as long as we come back and we come back to ourselves and we come home to ourselves and we go, and that's what I see you doing, and just like going, oh, but this is true, and we're just going to keep leaning into it. So I can see why why I'm here, because I appreciate that you get it, because you're doing it yourself. So and I'm sure anybody that's listening to this, that how much you've served women are, and held that space for people to hear different ways of staying in life and supporting each other. So
thank you. As this reminded me, actually, just before we finished, but it just reminds me when I had gone to Peru, and then I came back from Peru, and even though I hate being in the heat, and I particularly dislike humid heat, there was something about being in the Amazon jungle for a week. I mean, I was like a little puddle over there, but the sound of the rain on my little hut on the, it was just like palm fronds or something on the roof, was so completely compelling. And so when I came back to England, all I wanted to do was very bizarre. I wanted to lie down, face down on the grass when it rained. It was a very peculiar sort of yearning, but the yearning, I mean, didn't fail me. I ended up being in a yurt in the wildest, wettest winter on record in Wales, having the sound was exactly the same. Right? It was just a bit cooler. But there I was in a yurt, this canvas yurt with this incredible torrential downpour day after day after day over a 4-month period. And every now and again it'd be like, what am I doing here? But what you were saying about being with horses, and it was like one of the greatest learnings that you've had, and that understanding your resilience, that's what I got from being in the yurt. It was I found it the most frightening, but the most magical. And that sense that we are so much more resilient and resourceful and able and magical than most of us think. And that's where I'm going.
The fear is there, isn't it? Because one of the things that I learned with horses is just how scared I am. I mean, I'm 58 years old, and I spent like all this time working on myself, thinking that I've got, not that I've overcome fear, because I'm not that deluded, but that I've got a relationship with it, that I understand it, I know where it comes from. And then I spent the first 2 years of my horse going like, I'm terrified. There's moments when I'm so scared, and then that's just changed my whole relationship with fear and what. So it's just impeccable, isn't it? And we say the teacher shows up, and it's like, I didn't know mine was going to come in the form of a horse. But I talk about the guide, and I so honor and respect my horse, that it allows me to do the things that I do, and so it's a fascinating journey. And I don't know where I intend to put on horse magic programs soon. We're moving to a new venue, so it's going to be beautiful, seaside, ocean, beautiful venue.
So you'll let us know.
Absolutely.
But in the meantime, for whoever is drawn to connecting with you and contacting you, do you have a website, and how do they connect with you, Paula?
Probably the best way is to email me, Paula@beyondknowing.co.uk. I do have a website, but it's been revamped at the moment, but there is information there, Paula, beyondknowing.co.uk. So, and there is a place in the website that you can contact me if you'd love to hear more or talk more.
And then we're going to talk further once you've settled in your new venue about the potential of you hosting a specific horse magic adventure for our silver members here.
Would be such fun.
First on that list.
Yeah. Well, if we, I'm very happy to create that with your friendship. Absolutely love to. I think it would be such fun.
Fantastic. Well, thank you. I think we're up to the hour. Thank you so much. Let me see. No, that's not. Oh yes, stop live screens.
Thank you.
Live stream. So thank you, Paula. And this has been just a gem.
Yeah, thank you.
And now